Hello, welcome to Mark Langley's Horsemanship Podcast, a podcast helping people to understand their horses better, to provide solutions in a calm, connected way. I'm Jenny Barnes.
And I'm Mark Langley.
Mark, the questions for you today are a little bit of a range of questions. Well, I'm going to get you to just talk about helping someone who's riding out on trail, out and about with her horse and having a few problems, and also just to give some advice to a couple of people about how they can connect with their horse. They're connecting really well on the ground, but they want to transfer that connection to what's happening under saddle, and they are having a few problems with ears pinning and not being able to get that forward movement. And someone else whose horse has reverted to struggling with the girth getting done up and has put a buck in. So I just want to hear your thoughts on how both of those two can progress. So we'll kick off, first of all, with the question from Viv. And she says that she's going out on a trail ride. Her pony will not cross the water unless somebody else is in front of him. However, on the return trip, he's happy to cross any water anytime, even if he hasn't crossed it before. How can she get around this one?
Yeah, Viv, that's it's one of those common things that horses that don't have a lot of confidence, leading out, will often use the confidence of the other horses, like a lead horse or something like that, and some horses, you could be walking on the ground and lead your horse across water, but you try and ride it across and the horse won't do it. But on the way home, there's enough desire going back to the safety of home and things like that to override, the situation. So the horse is kind of thinking forward, so it kind of crosses the water. What's happening when your horse rides out, its thoughts are behind it because it's still kind of thinking at home, and then the water presents as a bit of a boundary in front of it. So it's like a bit of a double sort of, I don't want to cross it, but maybe the water, so because the horse's thoughts are behind it, it's not really thinking about the water in front of it so much, and it's just easier just to sort of block it, not want to cross it. So yeah, basically it's just a matter of getting the horse's thoughts on the water, getting it to let go of what's behind it. So really, I might be walking up to water and the horse kind of goes like, oh no, I don't want to go across that, and starts to deflect back a little bit to kind of the homeward direction. And that's where I'd sort of just put a turn on the horse and say, well, that's not available. And I just reset them and try again. Sometimes, depending on where your horse is at, I just use without reins, just a little bit of a leg to create a little bit of movement and desire, but I'd have a loose rein. And then the horse would probably fold back a little bit to home. And then I'd say, well, that's not available. Try again. And I'd allow the horse to kind of turn back a little. And then I'd say, try again. And every time I see the horse's thoughts thinking across, that's when you just sit quietly on them and then you say, try again. So really you're just saying that thought behind's not available. And then you give the horse a chance to think about what's in front of it. And if you do it fairly carefully and don't just start to drive, then the horse will cross softly across the water, sniff it, cross it, and it won't be such a problem. If you go down the old drive, push, pressure until the horse just kind of realizes that they can't go backwards, so it just leaps across. And then once they leap, then basically every gully after that, they're going to leap. So yeah, as I say, you're not kind of setting the reins to make the horse face it. When you ask for a bit of impulsion through the legs or something like that, your horse has got enough freedom to turn back. And it's just when they turn back, you just say that's not available. The other thing I also want to look at too is if you're not using your legs to do it, you're just using the reins. I just wiggle them across one way, get one eye on the scary thing, and then I turn them back the other way, and the two eyes come through, see it, and then the other eye. And this will also show them that behind's not available, and you're just wiggling from side to side, opening up the front feet and just thinking them across to the right, and then opening up the front feet, thinking them across to the left. And then they just quietly, if there's a spot there where they sort of stretch out and have a look at it, you just sort of give them some space to think about it. The other thing I also do for some horses, and this would be so they don't jump, is I'd step them in at an angle. So basically stepping them in at an angle means if they need to kind of back out, they can just step out sideways. And there's not just facing it straight on and they leap across, they're kind of coming in at an angle. And that helps a lot of horses step into things and go across a bit more carefully if you come in from the angle. But it also means, as I say, there's a bit of an escape route for them. which makes it easier for them to go, well, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They can sort of slowly figure out if they want to go in or come out. But if they think the door's closed behind them completely, then they may just take the option of not thinking about it and leaping. So though you are saying behind's not available, you're not sort of, making it that they can't kind of think back and try it. There's a little bit of room there for them to go, I can move away, then I can move back. Whereas if you sort of, just got the door behind them too closed, then that's when they start to push back and go, no, too much pressure. So, if you just kind of work on that, you'll find that you'll just get them confident across the stream. So once they let go of that backward thought, then they're going to take on the idea of those things. Because obviously when the other horses are in front, they get the confidence off the other horse. Or when they've got a forward thought on the way home because they're free and forward and they know to get through that creek, they have to get across that creek to get to where they feel comfortable, then they'll sort of go through that creek because there's more of a reason to do it.
Yes, it's not so much that it's the creek, it's that it's where they're thinking. They know the land ahead of them, but they don't on the way home, but on the way out, they're like, there's just not, that's just that unknown. Yeah, right.
And the creek's a little bit more of a threat when they're not thinking that way, because it's, because it's something that they're a little bit bothered by, but when they've got a strong forward thought, they kind of, I guess they put up with it and go through it a bit like tunnel vision. They don't think about it; they just kind of get through it. Whereas when they're not, they don't have that tunnel vision. They have to think about it, and it sort of presents as a bit more of a scary thing.
Okay, all right. Now it's showtime here in Australia. Shows are popping up left, right, and centre. And for any of you who are wanting to take your horse to the show, we've got a tip coming up from Mark. He doesn't know this yet, Mark, but we've got a question from M, who would like to know how she can get her pony to trot in hand, please, so she can take it to the show. The first few attempts, she's finding her pony lagged behind her with pinned ears and attempted to bite her.
That's a common thing when horses follow and try and bite. It's a funny one because when you teach foals, sometimes when they start trotting behind us or leading behind us and we're in front of them, what ends up happening is after a while, I don't think they realise they're following us. They actually think they're chasing us sometimes too. And you see some get nippy and pushy because obviously with a person going in front of them and them following behind, it doesn't take long before they think they're driving. That's sometimes why horses get nippy. The other reason is because they still don't understand things very well, especially in the lead rope. And when they see our energy going up trying to trot them, it all gets a little bit hectic and there's a bit of emotion in there and they get a bit nippy and, sometimes anxious. As I say, sometimes pushy because they think they're driving us and stuff like that. But basically what you really want to look at is how well does the horse lead and how comfortable is it with leading pressure. So I would always go back to lots of backwards, forwards, soften in my hand, not even get the horse to trot up in hand. I'd work on that for a little while because when I've tried to get horses to trot in hand and I haven't done a lot of them really softening and letting go some of the brace, it can turn into a bit of a wrestle, and then you kind of got to use more stimulant through a flag or something like that to get them to wake up and move. Whereas when I've gone back to them becoming more comfortable with the feel of that not moving backwards and forwards and me, putting head pressure on them and them softening, then it's always, it's so much easier when they've done a lot more of that. So you might sort of aim that, okay, this week I'm not going to get them to trot up in hand. I'm just going to show them how to release the pressure and move and loosen their feet up and loosen their thoughts up. And you might do some lifting till you lift until the horse kind of releases through all 4 feet and opens the mind up a little bit. You'll do some backwards and forwards, and then you'll get to a stage that you can do some hindquarter yields and move the forequarter over. And there shouldn't be any wriggling and fighting and nipping at your hand and all that sort of stuff when you hold your horse at the knot or under the chin. And if you've done a fair bit of that and you feel your horse is nice and comfortable and loose, what I do is I start the process on a longer lead, so the horse has a lot of room to trot. Instead of like in hand, like at the show, you want to do it in hand. So they're coming up beside, but the first thing you want to teach them is to follow the feel of that rope when it moves forward. So sometimes I might have, 2 meters of rope, sometimes even 3 meters of rope, and I'll just walk on ahead and I'll sometimes have a flag, because the flag will get the horse to push back and really, instead, the horse, if they do to suddenly shut out a little bit to the head pressure, then I might have the flag out in front and give it a pop, and they'll sort of push back and wriggle a little, and then they'll sort of come forward. But what I'll do is I go out ahead, I'll have the rope fairly loose so the knot's just hanging, and then I'll just pick up the rope until the knot under their chin starts to push forward, and I'll create a little. If they're sort of dulling out, I might pop the flag. They'll wake up and they'll just you'll see a little bit more energy come in them, and they'll just release some of that pressure just a little bit as they come forward. And then instead of keeping on going and speeding up and keeping on pulling, I'll just loosen that knot back down again and let them come down again. And then I'll pick up that again, create a little bit of push forward in them, and then loosen again. So they just have to do a little bit. And then I'll just keep rocking up into that at a distance until they start to go, and then you'll feel them start to soften up and come through a lot softer. And then you can continue that push a little more, and then they'll sort of start to trot up a little bit, and then you go slow again, and then you go trot up again until that resistance is all gone. When and by having the horse at a distance, they can't bite you. They're far enough away. All they're learning to do is follow the feel of that rope up. They might see you out ahead with a bit of energy, and that might help them want to go forward and catch up. But where people go wrong is they start to get their energy right up and run really fast, and the horse is looking at them running, but then the horse is still leaning on the pole pressure. And I don't think we want the horse to, necessarily trot because you're running. We want to firstly get them comfortable with the leading. So at a distance, you're out of harm's way. They can't bite, and all they're doing is, you're going to be quieter, but the rope's going to create a little bit more noise when you pick it up and say, come forward. So it's just between them and the rope for a little while until they're working really soft on that rope. And then all I do is decrease the length of the rope the softer they get. So it might be, as I say, at 2 meters or more, and then it might go at 1.5 meters, and then eventually I'll have a foot of rope and I'll push that knot forward. They'll trot up until eventually I can have 10 centimeters of rope, and I can just push up and they'll just trot up, and you can put them where you like. So then I'll start to practice trot up, slow down, trot up, slow down, and I'll probably keep a nice steady walk, and they can trot up and then slow down. So I'm keeping a steady pace, and they're kind of following the feel. And once they're really understanding it's the feel they're following, not us running and them running, then we start to kind of get them to jog, and then we jog with them. So instead of you jogging first and hoping they're going to jog, I try and get the horses to jog up, and then I trot with them and match them. So I kind of mirror their flow. So and it's the old Tom Dorrance saying, I follow you, you follow me, and then we go together. I like to get my horses trotting up, and then I'll trot with them. They trot up, then I trot with them. And then that's also better for the biting and all that sort of stuff, because you don't have a lot of body language. It's just the rope. And then once they're soft, then you can trot with them. And I find that's a little bit better for them. It takes a little bit of time. The old way that everyone gets taught to do if they want to take their horse to the show is just get it up in hand, put a dressage stick in the rib cage, and tap, 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 get it up, leading beside. And that's very effective in the sense of getting something done very quick. But what happens is the horses end up thinking back on the stick, and then they're kind of rushing forward, and because we haven't done a heap of work in hand, they're still heavy in hand and bouncing around. And at the end of the day, that doesn't stop them from pulling back. It's just kind of another way of chasing them up. So I think it's a quick way, but the way I'm trying to talk to you about it, you're gonna fix tying up. You're gonna help loading into floats. All those things are going to be helped because you're really working on the leading.
Okay, staying with that sort of forward idea, Karen has a question. After attending a clinic with you, she has a much better relationship on the ground with her horse. But now that they've started ridden work again, she's seeing his same old reluctance to go forward. She can get the transition to a trot or canter, but he's always thinking stop, and he absolutely resents the use of leg pressure. So she's starting to use more verbal cues for forward. However, he's happy to yield off the leg. So she wants to know, how does she help him to think forward without the ear pinning and the head tossing? And she also says he is actually much more forward out in the paddock, but he's meant to be a dressage horse.
A horse's relationship to us is important, and the horse needs to be connected and safe around us because it's such a close operating platform when we're riding. We're with our horses all the time, so it's imperative that our horse trusts us and has a connection with us. But that's only one part of the whole equation, and it's important that you've worked on that and got that established. In groundwork, when our horses feel safe with us, our job is to empower them to be able to be good leaders. We direct, and in some respects they lead. And sometimes in groundwork we can get a little bit sort of, we're leading it all the time. And so what I mean by, and as I said just for the last question, the Tom Donald saying, I follow you, you follow me, and then we go together. We're teaching our horses in groundwork to go to think something and go towards their thoughts, and we tag along to offer them guidance. And that's what riding's about. The horse leads, thinks through the situation, thinks over the log or whatever we're riding, wherever we're riding, and we tag along. So in your groundwork, you've also got to set up little situations where you've got your horse to lead out, go towards its thoughts, and you tag along and follow, and then you test its connection or its ability to, not destinate by asking it a question. That question could be just follow the feel of that lead rope back. So a lot of groundwork lessons I'll do, and something you might want to think about before you ride too, is encouraging your horse to walk on by and travel out on a long rope and search ahead while you follow. So check into that on the groundwork. And then in the ridden work, by the sounds of it, I'm not sure exactly what you meant by the horse yields well off the leg, because it's when your horse doesn't want to go forward, it's not moving forward off the legs. So I'm guessing maybe you're saying it yields sideways off the legs and stuff like that, so it's sensitive off the legs. But when the legs say go forward and it's got a backward thought, it's going no, the legs are kind of like a pusher. Now, if a horse doesn't have a lot of confidence, I try and put a human emotion or a human experience or feeling into my teaching students, because I want them to think about, imagine if you were in that situation, what would you do? So a horse that doesn't have a lot of confidence or something like that, or is thinking backwards, sometimes you can imagine, okay, I've just put you in the jungle and there's highly trained enemy everywhere, like the Viet Cong all hiding in the jungle, and I want you to walk forwards. How are you going to walk forwards? You're going to walk forward very carefully, and you're not going to miss anything. And you're going to walk slowly. You're not going to just rush through. Otherwise, you're going to get, you're going to get shot. But imagine if someone had a gun to your back, pushing you forwards. You'd be sucking back like that, going, no, they're going to find me. They're going to find me. So how we walk through a scary environment that we've never been before with possible enemies out there would be the same way a horse would walk through a new environment. But we're not scared of a garbage bin, so we don't see it as a threat, but the horse does, and the horse doesn't understand it. So we have to be very careful that we sort of give them time enough in those new environments to explore. And too often we see a lack of impulsion, so we squeeze and kick, whereas the lack of impulsion was because the horse was going, oh, too many scary things, or I'm thinking backwards, or whatever. So then they get kind of dull on the legs and they suck back on the legs. So you sort of, the first so many times in getting a horse to think forward softly and go forward softly is you're trying to get them, you're trying to allow them go at their processing speed until they learn that things are safer in front of them and it's not so scary. And when they get more confidence and they're starting to sort of have more education on them, then they can go into new environments and operate so much better and faster and have good impulsion and things like that. So in saying that, that's what I want you to think about when you use your legs. They're not just a pusher, and sometimes the horses aren't lazy. That's what I sort of want to make clear to everybody. That's why I use the reins to get a horse to move forward, is because I cannot make a horse go away from home itself if I'm just pushing it. The horse has to choose it. So I might create a bit of impulsion with the legs, and then when the horse turns back somewhere, I'll just steer it and steer it again when it stops. So basically, like, I'm not pointing and kicking and pointing and kicking. So what I would encourage you to do with your horse is maybe use the reins to free its feet up. So basically, when your horse gets stuck, just hold a rein, steer it till it moves. Hold a rein, steer it till it moves. What will happen is it'll keep moving back into the direction it wants to go or feels safe. And then when it goes that way, you can redirect it again. And not necessarily exactly where you want it to go, just redirect it. Just take a rein, redirect it. And what will start to happen is every direction will become equal. You like doing an asterisk, every direction becomes equal, and the horse will start to walk out and explore in every direction. Once every direction becomes equal, the horse has chosen to go in those new directions and probably sort of made an assumption that things are starting to be safe, and it can do that. And then when every direction is equal, it's not stuck at the yards in its mind or something like that. And then once every direction is equal, that's when you start to accelerate. But I would teach your horse to move forward off the legs. I do less lateral work with the legs and more impulsion work. So once the horse in the arena chooses every direction to be equal, it'll walk in every direction at its speed. You haven't chosen the speed yet. It's just had to choose that pathway in its mind to lead out ahead, and you just tag along on the saddle following it. If it stops, offer it a new direction. So every time the horse jams up and stops and all that sort of thing, free it up with the reins. Don't kick it. Once the horse is free in the reins and moving freely, the thoughts are free, then you start doing acceleration. And a lot of times I'll teach the horses to accelerate in their most favourite direction, or what was their most favourite direction. So it's easy for them to want to go forward off the legs. And I'll get nice quick impulsion. I'll say, come on, let's move forward off the legs, and they'll trot up. And then I'll go back to using the reins. Every time the horse gets stuck, because its mind somewhere else, you use the reins. The horse frees up again, frees up the feet, frees up the mind, starts moving. And then after maybe 100 goes, at using your legs, and the horse speeds up happily in its direction. Then soon it's done 100 transitions that have been positive, and you'll find the horse is freer going all directions. And you're reinventing the legs and saying these are a good thing, and they're just to make you speed up. Legs are not there to say keep going, or go, push, you must go that way. Legs are there to create more impulsion, more speed, but they're not there to, like a gun at someone's back, saying keep moving forward. If you use them like a gun at someone's back to keep moving forward, then the horse eventually just sucks back on them and gets real ear pinny with the legs and stuff like that. So the reins are most effective at getting a horse unstuck in the mind and the feet. Once that's happened, explore the acceleration and teach your horse how to move softly off the legs, and do acceleration as a lesson, not as a you will go somewhere. And then you'll find your horses will free up a lot more on the legs.
Can you just very quickly, just in 1 or 2 sentences, just explain what your thoughts are as to why the arena is where it's getting a bit stuck, but out in the paddock it's much more freer?
Well, in an arena, the horse is kind of, maybe there's not much to look at. Some horses, the interesting thing when they get out is there's different reasons, but some horses block up. They're okay in the arena, but they block up outside because there's so many new things out there. It overwhelms them. It's almost like the enemy's out there everywhere, and I'm sucking back. Whereas in the arena, they're comfortable and they can move around, and it's kind of like their little bedroom where they feel safe. So some horses, it's the opposite. But for this particular horse, by the sounds of it, it's one of those horses that gets out and goes, "Oh, shiny things." And there's all these things to look at, and they kind of just look off in the distance. And because their thoughts are so far ahead, well, where are their feet going to go? Where their thoughts are. So they shut down a bit in the arena. And also, people ride different in an arena than outside. They tend to, push in an arena and then let the horse kind of go outside. And but a lot of horses just see more things. There's more stimulant. Sometimes that little bit of adrenaline in them from all the things that they're looking at actually makes its own movement. And because their thoughts are ahead, they just kind of go ahead and they sort of pick destinations and go to them. So it has this effect that makes them move forward. And some horses, they move forward in a, they've got no confidence in the arena, but then when they get outside, they suddenly fixate and just go and block all the scary things out, like they're going to the light at the end of the tunnel. And that sometimes gives them a lot more forward. But yeah, oftentimes it can be that little bit more adrenaline, and they open up more, which means more movement, more desire, more acceleration.
Okay, thank you. And the next question, which is the last one for this session, is from Judy. So you know her horse, Xavier. He was a shutdown horse that you helped last year.
Yep.
And when you knew him, he'd sort of come back from a trainer and he was bucking with the girthing. And Judy's taken him on, and with your help, she sort of has got round that, and he has stopped doing the bucking when she girths him. But she recently took him to a friend's farm and he was, as you say, taking photos. Lots of distractions when she got him off the float. So she did the exercises that you taught her, getting him to get a little bit more focused. So backing, turning the hindquarters, sending past in both ways. But she thinks she may have missed something because when she tightened the girth, he was standing still and he did put a buck in. So she's wondering, should she have moved him? But interestingly, and it's going to quickly slip this one in, 3 days later, she floated him to another venue and he was calm, willing and focused. So very different.
Yeah, I was thinking about that question because I do remember him because he made some quite significant changes, which was really good. So just for all the listeners out there and Judy, what I want to sort of talk about is why he bucked when he first originally bucked, I guess, when Judy saw him before she brought him to my clinic, and what she explained to me and why he bucked. So the horse I met the first time was a frozen sort of shutdown horse that also had a bit of a gaze on him, like just a kind of a, but he wasn't like one of those real gazy off horses. He was more sort of just still frozen in a certain position, not the hidey down too much. It was just up frozen with a gazy eye. And we did a lot of just getting him to think, as in, think away from pressure and start looking for opportunity. So we did a lot of look for opportunity lessons, put a little flag near his eye, shake it a little bit till he kind of looks away from danger instead of fixate on danger and stuff like that. Once he started to open up, his senses opened up all the way through. He started to think, and his mind, his freedom of thought really opened up. So it was almost like he had a stuck thought, like a marble stuck in one spot, like it's been rusted there. And then we put a heap of grease and stuff in, and then that marble started to roll around. And what I mean by that is if we did something, if we even went up and just wriggled our finger near his eye, you'd see him go, oh, there's something happening. I'm going to look over there. Or so everything we were doing around him, he was sensitive to, and he was also very willing to search for new things. So his mind was constantly working, ears were flicking. So we basically turned him back on again emotionally. And his desire to search came back, and his awareness of what was around him, the people around him, the girths, all the things that we were doing, he became aware of. So that was like how we kind of originally opened him up, or that's what we did in opening him up. So I'm guessing what's happened in a new environment is it was just a slightly overwhelming environment, and he went back into his freezy, like, holy cow, everything's going on, I'm a bit tight, and I'm just kind of a little hyper focused on everything, which meant he was blocking out the things that you were doing. So as there was a moment of freeze went through his body, like he was frozen. The time that he bronked before he came to my clinic was, I said to you, he's just got girthed up when he was frozen, and then his senses came to life in one big explosion and he bronked. So what was happening, he was probably getting a little overwhelmed, and he went back into that freeze kind of gaze at things disconnect off you and what's happening. And then even though you're doing your best to get his mind and feet kind of back on track again, there was a bit of freeze in him when you were saddling him, and then there was a rush of, oh crikey, you got the saddle on, because he wasn't truly aware of exactly what you're doing. He wasn't loose and thinking about it. So you did the right things. I think you might have just not quite had him emotionally there. So I probably if you're doing it again and he was like that, I'd just leave the saddling. I'd take him, I'd get him on a long rope. I'd get him to come up a little bit. I'd just go for a walk with him, I get his attention off fixating on things, and I just try and work really hard on getting him back and aware of his environment and where he is. And I would forget about the overloading with extra things. I just work on the one thing and take the pressure off you, take the pressure off him in the sense of having to do all this other stuff, and just work on him becoming aware, soft, and resetting in that environment and rewarding him for that. Because, you know, he was really stuck when I first met him. You've done a good job of keeping him unstuck, but that environment might have been just a little too much. And both for you and him working in that environment would have been better to choose an easy thing or the most important thing for him to do and just leave it at that, just so he's kind of connected and reset well in that environment. And then in the easier environments where he's a lot softer, that's when you can saddle him and start riding him and stuff like that. But just work on getting him back in touch with his senses when he's getting an overload. So, you know, so you don't have to work as hard thinking about, oh, I've got to saddle him, I've got to do this, I want to ride him. You just put him in the best possible place so you could possibly think about saddling him and leaving him at that. So you've done that in that environment, and you get good at connecting him in that environment, and he gets a lot better at it in those sort of challenging environments.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you to everyone for their questions.
Thank you, Jenny. Thanks, everybody.
You can learn more from Mark online through his online training videos. Just search Mark Langley Horsemanship. There's over 380 training videos which everyone has access to with a 7-day free trial. If you like what you see, it's just $15 a month from there. That's help where you need it.